Everyone should have a meaningful life. The ADA started me on the path, and I'm very grateful.
The ADA has helped the deaf community to be more closer to equally functioning amongst the rest of us.
And today's legislation brings us closer to that day when no Americans will ever again be deprived of their basic guarantee of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
I'm Pete Sainer, the president of the Board of Disability Rights Wisconsin, and I'm so pleased that we're marking this important anniversary. 30 years ago, the Americans with Disabilities Act was enacted, making it possible for people with disabilities to participate fully in all aspects of American life. The ADA created a ban on discrimination on the basis of disability in transportation, telecommunications, public accommodation, and in public services. It banned discriminatory practices and segregation and institutionalization of people with disabilities. As a board member of Disability Rights Wisconsin, I'm proud to hear how our staff uses the ADA to protect and enhance the rights of people with disabilities in the state of Wisconsin. Thank you and congratulations on 30 years of the ADA.
And on your behalf, as well as the behalf of this entire country, I now lift my pen to sign this Americans with Disability Act and say, let the shameful wall of exclusion finally come tumbling down. God bless you all.
I'm Leah Kitts, the Executive Director of Disability Rights Wisconsin. The Federal DD Act of the 1970s created the Protection and Advocacy System, and DRW has been providing individual and systems advocacy since 1977. We are dedicated to protecting the personal and civil rights of people with disabilities. DRW serves Wisconsin's critical role in the nationwide effort to make sure that everyone can live a life free of discrimination. While the DD Act gives DRW our mandate, the Americans with Disabilities Act gives us a vital tool to carry it out. We're fighting for a life where each person can get around, enter buildings, enjoy the fun things in life, work to support themselves, have relationships that are meaningful, and just, have a great life. We're so glad you could join us in the celebration of the signing of the ADA 30 years ago.
My name's Lynn Breedlove. I was the Executive Director of Disability Rights Wisconsin from 1980 to 2011. And I'm going to talk a little bit about DRW's work with institutions. And that's always been a high priority for our agency, preventing people going into institutions, helping people get out of institutions, and when possible, even trying to close institutions. So one of the best examples of this was the closing of Northern Wisconsin Center, which is one of the big 3 state institutions for people with developmental disabilities in Wisconsin until it closed in 2006. So Northern Center started in 1897. It was around a long time before DRW existed. Thousands of people with disabilities lived there before we started doing advocacy for anyone who lived there. And for the first 15 years of our agency, we tried really hard to figure out a way to close one of the state institutions. We did a variety of advocacy strategies, and we did help some individual people get out, but we were never successful in closing one until 2002. And that's when Governor Jim Doyle was elected, and we persuaded him and his staff that he should propose to close Northern Wisconsin Center. And he did put that in his first state budget in early 2003. And not surprisingly, there was lots of backlash. We had opposition from unions representing the workers, opposition from some parents, opposition from local legislators. There was even a lawsuit to stop the governor from moving forward on this plan. But ultimately, we were able to persuade a majority of the legislature that this was a good idea, and we were able to team up with the governor's attorneys to win that lawsuit. And in the summer of 2003, the closing process began. It took 3 whole years to do it, but at the end of the day, over 90% of the residents moved into community settings. And a survey of families after the closing showed that 85% of the families who had originally opposed the idea now said they thought their family members were much better off than being in the institution. So this was a big ADA victory for DRW.
Hi, my name is Cindy Bentley. I'm the Executive Director of People First of Wisconsin. I'm here to talk to you about the ADA. The ADA helped me to get out of the state institution, and I'm a big fan of Justin Dart that signed the ADA bill with President Bush, and the ADA has been a very important thing for people with disabilities. It helped me not only get out of the institution, but it also helped me to become the director of People First of Wisconsin, which I enjoy being the director of People First of Wisconsin, and I have my voice, and other people with disabilities have a voice too. Everyone should have a meaningful life. The ADA started me on the path, and I'm very grateful. We can't change who we are, but we can be the change.
I was working with an organization and we were not getting the answers or having the questions answered that they wanted, meaning my social worker and the insurance. I then contacted the ADA and they got the answers that they needed, and it was a quick process. And I'm happily now in my own home, living an independent life. I want to make it so they really are a great thing to have for us that need that extra help.
Hi, my name is Monica Murphy. I'm an attorney with Disability Rights Wisconsin. Thanks to the Americans with Disabilities Act, I've been able to help many people with disabilities protect their employment rights over the years. However, by far the most memorable was Don Perkle. Don is a man with a developmental disability who is nonverbal. Don landed his dream job working as a cleaner at Chuck E. Cheese. He was happy in his new job, and his immediate boss was pleased with his work. One day, the regional manager came into the restaurant and saw Don working. He told Don's boss to fire him because we don't want those kind of people working for us. His manager, however, did not fire him, and instead, she reached out to the corporate office Human Resources Department in Texas asking, "Aren't we an equal opportunity employer?" She got no response. Instead, the next time the regional manager came to town, he fired Don himself. Don was heartbroken. According to his caregiver, he withdrew from social activities and stayed in his room. Folks who had helped Don find his job and provided his job coaching were outraged. The job coach provider talked to the CEO of Chuck E. Cheese's about the situation. Still, nothing changed. So he called our agency. We helped Don file a disability discrimination complaint under the Americans with Disabilities Act with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Despite several efforts to resolve the matter, Chuck E. Cheese would not make amends for the wrongs they had done to Don. Eventually, attorneys from the EOC and I took the matter to federal court in Madison. Here in this photo, standing outside the federal courthouse, is Don surrounded by his team. His Chuck E. Cheese manager, 2 attorneys from the EEOC, Don, myself, and his job coaching provider. We had a jury trial over 5 days. While the trial was going on, it got some publicity, and people picketed the Madison Chuck E. Cheese demanding an apology for Don. When the jury came back, they found that Chuck E. Cheese discriminated against Don and awarded him approximately $10,000 in back pay, $70,000 in compensatory damages, and $13 million in punitive damages. Although Don could not talk after the verdict, he pointed to his smiley face communication card, and it told me all I needed to know. Don's actual award was reduced later to the damages caps under the ADA, but he did get that apology letter from the CEO as well. Now, 20 years later, that $13 million verdict remains one of the highest, if not the highest, ADA verdict for a single plaintiff in an employment case. Thank you, Don. Thank you, ADA.
This is Jim Powell, a Deaf Disability Rights of Wisconsin board member and representative of the deaf community here in Wisconsin. ADA has helped increase and improve the communications between deaf and hearing people. ADA has enabled the deaf community to have access to functionally equivalent telecommunications such as video relay service, access to interpreters, such as doctors' offices and seminars, and as well has allowed us to go to things such as movies and watch TV through the services of closed captioning. The deaf community here in Wisconsin is very grateful for the ADA. But understand, there are some areas where we do see there is room for improvement to better have access of communication for all.
Hi, I'm Denise Jeffs, the CEO and Executive Director of the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired, and a member of the Wisconsin Disability Vote Coalition. As we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, I've been reflecting a lot about the impact of that act on voters with disabilities. Voting is such a cornerstone of our democracy. It's one of the tools that we have for shaping our communities, our states, and our nation, and everybody's voice makes a difference. For far too long, voters with disabilities faced so many barriers that it diminished our voices being heard in those important decisions. The Americans with Disabilities Act and other voter-specific legislation has helped to remove some of those significant barriers. For example, we now have easier access to polling places. Every polling place should have accessible voting equipment. And we're able to also register to vote online. But despite the ADA being around for 30 years, our work of establishing full inclusion is not yet done. As a voter with a disability and someone who is legally blind, for example, I cannot yet cast a private and independent absentee ballot. In the state of Wisconsin, we don't have an ADA online accessible balloting option, so I require assistance in order to be able to complete my ballot. Voters who wish to use the polls still face access barriers for getting into the building and to the polling site, and for many, curbside voting may not be an option. Both curbside voting and accessible absentee balloting at home are just vital to being able to safely vote during this time of pandemic. So I really want to invite you to join me in celebrating our successes with the ADA and at the same time striving to work towards full equity for people with disabilities so that together we can fulfill the promise of the ADA.
As we celebrate the ADA 30th, DRW honors the life and legacy of a Wisconsin champion for disability rights, Cheryl Sunsenbrenner, who passed away in June. I had the pleasure to know Cheryl and have tremendous gratitude for her leadership. As a Wisconsinite with a disability, Cheryl was a national leader advocating for disability rights. She served as chair of the American Association of People with Disabilities and testified before Congress many times. She took a leadership role in advocating for the ADA Restoration Act of 2007. I remember meeting with then Representative Tammy Baldwin on the Hill, asking her to sign on as a co-sponsor of the bill. Representative Baldwin told me she had already been lobbied by Cheryl, who would not take no for an answer and was working tirelessly to ensure the bill was passed. In her testimony to Congress, Cheryl spoke about her pride in her husband, Congressman Jim Sunsenbrenner, and Majority Leader Steny Hoyer for their bipartisan work introducing this legislation. She stated, "Given that all kinds of disability can enter any person's life at any time, the more accessible the society we can create and the more intact our system of legal protections, the greater benefit we can all reap. The ADA then is a law for all people. It was meant to ensure that whatever the circumstances may be that surround a person's life and encounter with disability, Americans are never to be treated unfairly, excluded unnecessarily, or relegated to second-class citizenship on the basis of disability." Despite all the progress since the passage of the ADA, sadly, we still have a long way to go before the ADA's inclusive vision becomes a reality for America. Cheryl's words still ring true today. In our work at DRW, we see how the ADA has expanded opportunity, accessibility, and inclusion. We also see that the promise of the ADA is a work in progress. In my work as an advocate for voting rights, this year has seen significant barriers, including absentee ballots that are not ADA compliant, polling places that are not accessible, and non-drivers who cannot register to vote because they can't obtain the required photo ID. As DRW celebrates the 30th anniversary of the ADA, we recommit ourselves to advocating for a society in which people with disabilities are valued equally and are empowered to exercise and enjoy the full extent of their rights and to pursue the greatest quality of life. Our nation is stronger when all Americans have the opportunity to succeed.
Hello, Wisconsin. Governor Tony Evers here. On July 26, 1990, Congress passed the Americans with Disabilities Act, impacting millions of lives by ensuring civil rights and improving access to employment and services for folks with disabilities across our country. For decades, Wisconsinites with disabilities and their partners have taken on hard-fought battles and have had to work tirelessly to overcome interpersonal and institutional barriers. Thanks to their hard work and the passage of the ADA 30 years ago, millions of folks from all corners of our state and the nation and all different abilities are able to better connect with their communities and spaces that are built to be inclusive and accessible for all. But as we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the ADA, we recognize that much work still needs to be done to ensure equity and equality for folks with disabilities across our state and our nation. And we reaffirm our commitment to the principles of equality and inclusion for people with disabilities and to partner with the numerous organizations and agencies throughout our state, such as Disability Rights Wisconsin and Wisconsin Disability Vote Coalition, to realize the full promise of hope, freedom, and equality envisioned by the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act 30 years ago. So here's to 30 years of progress and inclusion, and to many more as we work together to move our state forward. Thank you.